we know with this Jane Doe account that it was actually Elsa who recorded the account. That's thanks to a few different content creators who independently verified the fact. And Elsa basically said, yeah, that's me. So once again, the original recording was altered. So it had that gravelly, lowered voice that was really horrible to listen to. So I put this one through filters like I did with the original one, with the first Jane Doe. I think it's actually easier to listen to than the first Jane Doe. It's certainly not gravelly anymore, but it does have a little bit of that echo that you get with trying to improve audio that's already been changed.
There were around 200 people. It's not very usual to see this at a party, especially at Sanctuary, because the road is so rough. People hate partying out there.
I'm just going to point out that I think that the reason why people gave a lot of credibility to this account is that she does say a lot of things which could be verified or do sound like they are right. So her saying that they don't often have parties there at the sanctuary because of the road is interesting. We've seen where people have done those driving videos and the road's not that great. So we know there that that's an honesty in terms of the road, and perhaps an honesty in terms of people don't usually have parties there. I'm wondering if that's also a bit of a slip up in saying there wasn't actually a party at that location. She says there were around 200 people there. I'm not going to get into the debate over the numbers, but we all have questions.
I never saw anyone sketchy show up. I never noticed anyone sketchy while I was there. I definitely never saw Jagger there. I don't think he was there at all.
So this aligns with other accounts that were out and about at the time. Even at one point in time, Sammy did say that there wasn't anyone there that was sketchy. Although in a different part of her account then she says that there was sketchy people there. But so you've got Elsa saying that there was no one there that was concerning. You've also got her saying that she doesn't think Jagger was there, she didn't see him there. And, we have no accounts firsthand of anyone saying that they saw Jagger at the party. So, right now, so far, everything that she's said sounds credible. Let's not forget, though, that many of these kids are high achievers. They've got scholarships, they got awards, they have somewhat higher IQs than the trucky local who went in boots and all and made up stories outright, which immediately made people question her credibility. It's actually quite an intelligent tactic to start coming out with verified facts first. Because if you can come out with verified facts that people know are the truth, then you can start slipping in those little nuggets of information that you want people to believe that may be less than truthful. So I'm listening to this cold, as in I listened to it originally when it was first released, and I haven't listened to it since. But I do remember my initial assessment being that this girl had come out and said a lot of things that people knew as being the truth, and use them to bolster things which to me seemed like bullshit.
When I spoke to Kiely, she was intoxicated, but she seemed happy. There was nobody there in wet clothes. They would have frozen so badly. It was raining all day that day. It was cold out.
So accounts I've heard were that there were a few showers during that evening, but that it wasn't raining all day before the party. And while she's correct, I don't think Kylie would have been there in a skimpy little tank top at the party at, 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock at night. I gather, and please, if someone from the area can confirm it, I gather it had been actually not a bad day during the day, and that it had been kind of warmish. So it's possible that she may have at one point in time been wearing a tank top and then put a jacket over the top. But she's correct. It would have been too cold to be hanging around at a party in a tank top, especially for Kylie, because we know that Kylie used to feel the cold. Meanwhile, her comment, Kylie was intoxicated, but she seemed happy. Okay, when did you speak to Kylie? And why are you saying that Kylie was intoxicated when it appears to me that, well, it appears to all of us, according to the autopsy, she wasn't intoxicated? Or had she perhaps been slipped something in a drink, and that's what you were witnessing? That would also explain for the she was happy. If someone had slipped her a drug and she didn't know, she may have been having a bit of an interesting experience.
I don't know about the shrooms. I don't smoke or trip on substances, so I don't really look for them. I do believe she was intoxicated before 11.
Just a small thing to note. She says, I don't know about the shrooms. She doesn't say I don't know about any shrooms or if there were shrooms, but I don't know about the shrooms. To me, that actually sounds like a confirmation that there were shrooms at the party. I may be wrong, but in terms of speech, that is the meaning that you would generally infer from that sentence, is that there were shrooms at the party, just that she doesn't do shrooms, so she can't tell you any more about them. Saying that Kylie was already intoxicated by 11 o'clock, for starters, there's no evidence that Kylie was intoxicated, but the thing that grabbed me with this is that it seemed to be in line with the Ronnie narrative. He was saying how his cousins were saying that Kylie was intoxicated quite early on. So, is their narrative coming from the same person? Or did Elsa truly see Kylie and infer that she was intoxicated because of perhaps behaviour that Kylie was displaying? Perhaps she had been drugged by someone, and perhaps that's why we have the account of her going back to the car at 11:30 or whatever it was to text her mum and ask for more time to say that she was going to be leaving later. Did the kids slip Kylie too much of something? And maybe she was displaying signs by 11 o'clock that made people think she was intoxicated. maybe they were already panicking at 11:30 and someone texted Lindsay to say that Kylie would be home later because they were trying to figure out how to get themselves out of that situation. Or maybe she was just saying that Kylie was already intoxicated by 11 o'clock because we know she's friends with Sammy, and perhaps this was one of the important points that Sammy needed put across. Because remember, Sammy said that she had asked Kylie for a ride and then decided she wasn't going home with her because she was too drunk. And that was apparently an important part of Sammy's narrative. So, was this one of the things that she was asked to put forward when she called in to give her account of the party?
The girls in the black and white photo were in Reno, not Prosser, and I know this for sure because I'm friends with the one that took the photo. I don't know about Sammy and Kylie's relationship.
So, pay attention to the sequencing of this narrative, because here she has apparently gone off at a tangent. So she was talking about Kylie being intoxicated before 11 o'clock. And then she started talking about Kylie's relationship with Sammy. I find it interesting that she worded it that way. I don't know about Kylie's relationship with Sammy, or whatever it was, using relationship rather than friendship. And I don't mean that in terms of saying that there was something going on between Kylie and Sammy. What I mean is that at this point in time, several of Kylie's friends and several other people had come forward and said Kylie was never friends with Sammy. There were already people, creators online, coming forward and saying, why is there nothing on social media that would show us that Sammy and Kylie were friends? So certainly at the time that she did this recording, it was already acknowledged that Kylie and Sammy weren't friends. So it would have been not in her interests to try and suggest that actually they were friends, because it would have then discredited the rest of her account.
I never saw Kylie fight anyone, but the fight that was on video was a playful fight. I know those boys.
So, in terms of her narrative, we have her initially talking about Sammy and Kylie together, straight off talking about any kind of relationship between Sammy and Kylie. She says, I didn't see Kylie fight anyone. So she's not saying that Kylie didn't fight anyone, which, you know, if you were one of the teens, you were there, you were part of the action, and you knew that a fight hadn't occurred, you would say that, yeah, no, there was no fight that happened between Kylie and anybody else. But she's not saying that. She's not refuting the possibility of a fight. She's simply saying, I didn't see a fight. So she's not saying a fight didn't happen. She's just saying she didn't see it. Perhaps she wasn't around at the time that the fight occurred.
I didn't see Kylie drink or smoke, but she did smell strongly of alcohol and was having a hard time walking straight, and her speaking was slow.
Is this girl's way of avoiding truth basically to lie by omission? Here, she's saying, I didn't see Kylie drinking or smoking. So she's being careful not to accuse Kylie of drinking or smoking. But then she says, but she did smell strongly of alcohol. Well, that's convenient, because if, as it actually did, the autopsy comes back saying that Kylie did not have significant levels of alcohol in her system, you're not going to be proven a liar. because you could then turn around and say, well, someone must have spilled their drink on her. So I think the way this girl says things is very important. And I think we need to pay close attention to that. I think the expectation of the listener here is for us to draw inferences from these little bits of information that she's given us that are not really bits of information. So saying, I didn't see Kiely and Sammy fight. From that, we are expected to infer that Kiely and Sammy did not fight. Other than what is the straight out statement of her saying, well, I didn't see Kiely and Sammy fight. So they may have actually fought. Likewise, I didn't see Kiely drinking or smoking. So she's not saying that Kiely was drinking or smoking, or that she wasn't drinking or smoking. She's saying that she didn't see it, but that Kiely smelt strongly of alcohol. So we are expected from this statement to infer that Kiely was completely plastered. She does say outright that Kiely was having trouble walking straight and that her speaking was slow. Is she telling us a truth here? If so, it is extremely alarming, because she's saying that this was before 11 o'clock. Kiely had been at the party for half an hour, and you're telling me that she was having trouble walking and her speech was slow. Shouldn't that have caused red flags for you? Shouldn't you have been questioning if perhaps someone had drugged this girl? Just a question, I don't know. So if she is in fact telling the truth here, I find it concerning. And of course, having trouble walking and having slow speech is certainly no indicator of her being drunk. It is an indicator that something was wrong, but it doesn't necessarily mean that she was drunk. And we know that she wasn't drunk. So while she has said, I didn't see her drinking or smoking or anything, and then turned around and said that she was having trouble walking and her speech was slow, she's still not saying to us that Kiely was drunk. She's simply telling us something was wrong.
I don't believe that this could have been a drunk accident, honestly. Sanctuary Road can be impossible to drive on, especially with how intoxicated she seemed when I talked to her. Just a week before, a kid had hide-centered his truck on the road, so it's not an easy one to navigate, like, even sober.
Now that was really interesting. And I must admit, even the first time listening to it, it threw me for a loop, because I believed that this girl was coming forward to back up Sammy's stories. But we know she's telling the truth here. It couldn't have been a drunken accident, because the road wasn't the sort of road that you could drive along drunk. She mentions someone bottoming out their vehicle, and that would have happened to Kiely. She would have either bottomed out in one of the ruts, driven off the road, or ran into a tree. If she was drunk, she could never have made it down to the water. So she's spot on here. I'm just wondering if is someone trying to do the right thing, and perhaps she's just misinformed in some spots, or if this is part of the whole bigger narrative and there's a bigger story that we're meant to buy.
and I don't know anything going on between Kate and Jagger. I tend to stay out of people's personal relationships just because it isn't my business.
I'm wondering now if she was given a list of questions to answer, because jumping from saying that I don't think this was a drunken accident to talking about Jagger and Kate, it's a really weird transition within the narrative. So to me, I'm wondering now if the reason that her narrative skips around is because she is actually sitting there and answering a bunch of questions.
I had personally seen Kiely around that night, but I also didn't ever see her with Sammy, and Sammy didn't even actually host the party. It was 3 boys from the area, one from Incline, one North Tall, and one Truckee.
Okay, this goes back to my original question that I posed with Jane Doe number 2. Were these people inserted to fix the narrative? We know that after Sammy came out and did her various interviews, that there was a lot of backlash. People were questioning several of the things that she said because it just didn't make sense. And in terms of timing for when these 2 Jane Does suddenly popped up, this was mid-September. So putting it in perspective, this was after Kiely had been found, before the autopsy had been released, but most importantly, after Sammy had gotten herself a criminal defense lawyer. We just have to look at the fuckery that's going on with the Idaho 4 and with Delphi, etc., where there's gag orders, but they're still finding ways to get around those gag orders and put out information that's got people scurrying around, coming up with different theories that is pretty much allowing them to manipulate people into making these 2 men look innocent. So, is this a similar strategy? It seems like one of the major things from playbooks of defense attorneys is damage control. To bring in new stories that are going to try and make their clients look peachy, but without having it come directly from them or the client, so that it looks like there's someone else speaking up and saying, well, here's the truth. We know that Sammy's family are not short on cash. So whatever criminal defense lawyer they hired, it's going to be someone who's going to be pretty good at what they do. So they would have told Sammy immediately, you need to shut up, stop putting out any more information. And perhaps the next strategy was to start fixing some of the things that Sammy said that were going to make her look guilty. The first of those being Sammy saying that her and Kiely were together the entire night at the party. Remember, at this point in time, they didn't have autopsy results. All they have is the knowledge that Kiely has been found in Prosser Reservoir. People are already questioning things with regards to that, and this is before, I believe it's before Adventures with Purpose's video came out. So it was that period of time when people were questioning how come they didn't find her if she was right there in the reservoir, but they didn't have any of the additional information that came out after the release of Adventures with Purpose's video. So was the whole point with these Jane Does to start distancing Sammy? You've got Elsa creating a credible story of her saying, well, I didn't see Kiely drinking or smoking, but she did appear in a manner that could be seen as being drunk. In other words, we don't have the results yet from the autopsy. So we're just going to be careful here. We don't want to blow this witness that's suddenly come forward by having her claim that she saw Kiely just chugging all night, if it's not going to come out in the autopsy that that wasn't the case. But we do want to create the impression that she was a little bit under the weather. And then we're going to turn around and have her say, well, I didn't see them hanging around together. Now, for me, the thing that blew Elsa's credibility was her claiming that it was actually 3 boys who hosted or organised the party. Or, well, she said hosted, she didn't say organised. But she seemed pretty clear on this fact. It was 3 boys who hosted this party. So she's trying to separate Sammy from it. But the thing is, we've had so many different accounts of people saying, yeah, Sammy organised it, Sammy was the host. So for me, this completely blew her credibility. Like I said, she said things before this which were verifiably correct. But now we're going off at a tangent and we're saying, I never saw Sammy with Kiely. And it wasn't Sammy who hosted the party, it was a bunch of boys, one of whom wasn't even there at the party. This is when I started questioning whether she was put out there to correct the narrative and to separate Sammy from Kiely, so to speak. Because after all the things that Sammy said, with her having got herself a criminal defence lawyer, they've probably gone, okay, we got to fix this. How can we fix this without it being something that becomes questionable in a court of law?
And the Truckee boy actually had work that night, so I don't think he was there. I never ended up seeing him. I'm from Truckee, I know this boy well, but I don't remember seeing him. When I spoke to Kiely that night, she was severely intoxicated, like she had been stumbling, her speech was slurring, but I also don't know her well, so I don't know her normal behavior.
Again, she refers to Kiely as seeming intoxicated, but then adds that little caveat that I don't know Kiely, so I don't know her normal behaviour. So she's backing herself up, basically, so that she can't be held accountable for what she's saying. So, well, she kind of looked drunk, but gee, I don't know her, so I might not be correct. I know that's a very broad way of saying it, but that's the gist of what I felt that she was trying to imply.
I'd only seen her around and maybe spoken to her once or twice at things like parties. Other than that, I never really saw her. She did go to a different school than me. She did mention having a ride, but she was alone and it was dark when I talked to her.
She mentioned having a ride, but she was alone and it was dark when I was talking to her. Okay, so I can get she mentioned having a ride, but she was alone. I get that bit, and it was dark. I'm not sure how that ties in with her having a ride. just questioning. But I think that the significant takeaway that we are supposed to get from this is that Kiely was alone. She was not with Sammy. It seems to me that the narrative that she's trying to build is one of Kiely being a bit of a loner at the party. She was alone, hence no one else was responsible for anything that happened to Kiely, and that she seemed to be somewhat under the weather, but that Elsa can't say for what reason and just how much, because she didn't know Kiely. So from this, we're supposed to take away that Kiely was basically roaming the party on her own, drunk, and said she had a ride. And yet, we know that she had told her mum that she was heading home at a specific time. We know that she'd told friends at 12 o'clock that she wanted to go home. So why would she be wandering around on her own at the party? Wouldn't she have just hopped in her car and gone home? And yet again, we know from the autopsy she wasn't drunk.
People have also commented about kids not seeing things, and the moon was bright that night, but Sanctuary is under trees, and I had a hard time seeing because the generator that was running the lights had turned off or gone home earlier, so I personally couldn't see very much.
So at first glance, you would think that she's just simply stating a fact. It was dark, the generator had been turned off and taken home, so you couldn't see much. But if you tie it in with the other things that she is saying, could this in fact be her setting up plausible deniability? So that while she's putting this account out, at the same time, she's saying that she never saw Kiely actually drink. She never saw Kiely with Sammy. And now she's saying that it was quite dark, so she's not entirely certain of what she saw.
That night, people began to show up around 9. It was a small group of people that I knew. I wasn't close with any of them, but I knew them, so I was happy they came. And I felt comfortable around them. Around 10, a huge group of people showed up. A friend of mine was leading them. She said, "I don't know any of these kids, but they were all down on the road by the intersection because they had no clue where to go, so I led them to the right place." My guess is that these kids must have not been from Truckee, and they were from the Tahoe region, around Incline mostly, and maybe some North Tahoe kids, because most Truckee and a lot of North Tahoe kids know where Sanctuary is because it is a popular spot for us.
I think this is where her narrative starts to fall apart, because she says that people arrived at 9, or she arrived at 9. To me, for starters, did she arrive with Sammy? Because isn't that when Sammy arrived to set up? So was she one of the people that was there setting up the party? Now, earlier on, she was trying to suggest that there was no one there that was alarming or scary or disturbing. But now she's trying to establish that around 10 o'clock, a bunch of kids that nobody else knew rocked up at the party. And these were strangers. Okay, so maybe you are a super confident girl and you didn't feel concerned that a bunch of strange kids had rocked up. But wouldn't that fall into the category of slightly disturbing? You're having a party with your friends, and a bunch of kids that you don't know suddenly turn up. And then there's the huge contradiction. At the very start of this narrative, she said that they don't often have parties at the sanctuary because it's not so easy to access. But then she's saying that these other kids turned up and they supposedly didn't know where to go, but all the other local kids know where to go because they're used to having parties at the sanctuary. So which is it? Something there doesn't quite fit. So I think this is where the narrative is starting to fall apart. I think this is where she's trying to add on to the narrative, and it's not working.
I noticed that a lot of people have commented that there aren't many photos and videos from that night, and it's true. A lot of kids up here don't spend their time on their phones at parties.
Okay, I don't really need to say this, but bullshit. We've seen all of you guys' social media since then. You all take your phones to parties. You all make TikToks, post pictures, and post videos.
I personally never noticed a whole lot of kids on their phones other than when people were like taking B-reels or just taking random pictures. But most of the time it's like 0.5s of their friends' faces, like funny stuff like that, not anything like crazy that actually shows the party. Like, I know I personally don't take pictures of parties in general. Around 10:30 there were glow sticks all over the ground. That was one thing that I noticed because a boy had brought them earlier in the night and people were like putting them on, all this stuff, but they had started to fall off people. The glow sticks I had fell off. So I was putting them in bottles and like setting the bottles places. A lot of kids also started to pick up the glow sticks and throw them at each other, which was making some people really mad. There's also been a lot of talk about the fight that was shown on the news from that night. You can see in the picture I'm going to send you of the invitation that was sent out that night, the background of it is a picture of a fight from earlier this year at a party, because they're very common up here. People always bring boxing gloves to parties, and friends box each other for fun, but it's always friends. Like, there's never any ill intention.
Yep, got to push that narrative about the fights only ever being for fun, and there's never any ill intention. And yet we have heard from multiple people about fights that were to do with rivalry from different schools, etc. And you yourself, Elsa, posted that social media post where you were like, all of our senior against their seniors or whatever.
In these matches, there are always kids mediating these box fights and are there to break them up if they need to, and there's always the biggest rule during these is you're not allowed to hit the other person in the head or the face, just because we don't actually want anyone getting injured. Like, I've personally been in a boxing match with a friend just for fun, and I didn't want to hurt her, it was just for fun.
So another contradiction, they're fun fights, but then there's kids who referee and who pull the fights apart if they start getting too serious. You're crossing a line there. So I'm going to break this video into two halves, because the next bit that comes up I do have quite a lot to say about. So I think in terms of the length of video, just because of the capabilities for editing that I have, which mean that I can't do anything super lengthy, I think it's just going to be easier if I do a part 2 of this rather than try and do it all in one hit. So I'll leave it there. Stay tuned for part 2.
I've been